Hello everyone, I am the Midnight Storyteller. I know you clicked on this video to relax for a while or perhaps to let my voice help you fall asleep. Before you do, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you now? And what time is it? Alright, find a comfortable position and relax. There was a spot in my backyard, near the back fence, under an old, overgrown lilac bush. It looked no different from the rest of the lawn, green grass, brown soil beneath. It wasn't a high-traffic area, just a quiet corner of the yard. I must have walked over it dozens of times without a second thought. But then, one afternoon, as I was walking back from checking the fence, I stepped on that specific patch of ground, and I felt it, a subtle but distinct feeling of sinking. As my foot landed, the ground seemed to give way slightly beneath me. Maybe only half an inch, a feeling like stepping onto something soft and yielding, like thick mud or very wet sand, but without the squelch or the visible depression. It wasn't a stumble, it was the ground itself feeling unstable. I paused, confused, and shifted my weight. The ground felt solid again. Weird. I thought, must be wetter under the bush there. I dismissed it as just an uneven patch, maybe where water pooled after rain. But over the next few days, I found myself consciously or subconsciously walking over that spot again. And each time the feeling was there, that subtle and possible sinking sensation. It was always in the exact same area, maybe a 3-foot by 3-foot patch under the bush. It never looked different. The grass was still level with the rest of the lawn. The soil felt firm if I poked it with my finger. But when I put my weight on it, it yielded just that little bit, that unnerving half-inch before feeling solid again. I started trying to test it. I'd step on it deliberately, focusing on the feeling. It was consistent. That brief, unsettling give. I'd jump up and down on it. The ground felt firm, unyielding, no bounce. I asked my friend to step there when he was over one weekend. Feel anything weird? I asked, trying to sound casual. He stepped on it. Nope, he said, shrugging. Seems like normal ground. His inability to feel it amplified my unease. Was it just me? Was it something about my weight, my perception? But the feeling was too distinct, too physical, to be mere imagination. It felt like the ground was solid for everyone else, but for me it was thin, like a membrane stretched over something soft or empty below. Then came the sounds. Standing on or near the spot, especially in the quiet of the evening, I started hearing faint sounds that seemed to come from below the ground. Muffled thuds, like something bumping against earth far down. A low, continuous hum that seemed to vibrate up through the soil. Sometimes, a distinct scraping sound, like something dragging itself across stone or rock. These sounds were quiet, easily missed, but they were there, undeniably emanating from beneath that particular patch of ground. The sounds, combined with the sinking feeling, painted a horrifying picture. There was something under my yard, something active. The sinking feeling wasn't just instability. It felt like the ground was being pulled down, or yielding to something pressing up from below. The initial confusion gave way to a deep, creeping fear. I started avoiding the area, walking wide around the bush, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Watching it from my kitchen window, did the grass look greener there? Did the bush seem to droop more? Was the air above it colder? My paranoia was turning every observation into a potential sign of the unknown below. I decided I had to know what was down there. Armed with a shovel and a sense of desperate resolve, I began to dig carefully around the edge of the sinking patch. I dug down about a foot. The soil was normal, dark earth, interspersed with roots from the bush. No strange objects, no signs of disturbance, no void. I probed the ground within the patch with a metal rod. It met firm resistance, normal soil density, maybe a few stones. Nothing felt hollow or yielding from above. Yet, when I placed my hand on the ground, I still felt that subtle sense of cold emanating from that exact area. The futile investigation only increased my fear. If it wasn't a physical void or object, what was it? Was it something supernatural? Was the ground a barrier to another space? The history of the property was unremarkable, just residential. No reports of wells, sinkholes, or unusual incidents in that spot. The psychological toll was immense. I was consumed by the mystery of the sinking patch. Sleep was difficult. my dreams filled with images of falling endlessly through dark earth. I felt a constant, low-grade dread, a sense of vulnerability whenever I was in my own backyard. The ground beneath my feet no longer felt solid, reliable. It felt thin, fragile, a mere crust over something unknown and terrifyingly active. The sinking feeling became more pronounced. It wasn't just a half-inch yield anymore. Sometimes it felt like the ground was dipping a full inch, maybe more, pulling my foot down with a subtle yet undeniable force. The sounds from below intensified. The muffled thuds were louder, more rhythmic, the scraping more frantic, the hum a deep, resonant vibration that I felt in my bones. The climax came one night. A heavy rain had just passed, and the air was still and quiet. I was standing near the edge of the patio, looking out at the dark yard, my eyes drawn to the spot under the bush. I felt that familiar pull, that morbid fascination battling my fear. Hesitantly, drawn by an invisible force, I took a step towards the patch, and another, until I was standing right at its edge. The sinking feeling began immediately, but this time it didn't stop, it accelerated. The ground under my feet seemed to drop away rapidly, pulling me down. It felt like a trap door had opened beneath me, but I was standing on solid grass. I yelled out, a strangled sound of panic, and tried to scramble backward, but it felt like something was grabbing my ankles from below, pulling with immense unseen force. As I struggled against the pull, I heard it, a torrent of sounds erupting from beneath the ground. Loud, frantic scraping, like multiple things clawing against rock, a chorus of low, guttural growls that vibrated up through the soles of my shoes, and piercing through it all, a sound like thick mud or wet earth being violently disturbed, a sickening, sucking sound. The ground beneath me didn't visibly crack or open, but for a terrifying second, as I looked down, the surface seemed to shimmer, to distort, like looking through heat haze, and I had a fleeting, horrifying visual impression of darkness swirling just beneath the grass, and a sense of shapes moving within it, dark and fast. Fueled by sheer terror, I twisted my body with all my might, kicking my legs, desperate to break free from the unseen grip. With a final agonizing heave, I felt my ankles release, and I scrambled backward, falling onto the firm, stable grass of the patio, gasping for air, my legs burning, my heart hammering against my ribs like it would explode. The sinking feeling vanished instantly. The sounds from below stopped. The ground under the bush looked normal, still, unremarkable. But I lay there on the patio, trembling, soaked in sweat, the terrifying sounds and the feeling of being pulled still echoing in my mind and body. I never go near that spot anymore. I've put up a small decorative fence around the bush, not to keep anything out, but to keep myself away. The bush grows, the grass is green, it looks like any other part of the yard. But I know what's beneath it. Something is down there, active, capable of affecting the surface, capable of pulling. The intense sinking feeling hasn't returned since that night, but I sometimes feel a subtle pressure on my feet or ankles, or the air around me feels momentarily heavy, and for a second, I'm transported back to that terrifying struggle. I hear phantom scraping sounds, or feel a phantom cold emanating from the ground beneath me, even when I'm miles away. The experience fundamentally changed my relationship with the earth. I look at the ground differently now. I see it not as solid, inert matter, but as a thin crust separating me from something else, something unknown and terrifyingly close. The sinking feeling showed me that sometimes the most horrifying things aren't found by looking up or around, but by realizing what's waiting just beneath the surface of the world you stand on, and that some ground isn't just ground, it's a lid, and something is trying to get out, or pull you in, and the chilling knowledge that it's right there, in my backyard, is a weight I carry always. We see reflections of ourselves all the time in mirrors, glass, polished surfaces. And in water, still water acts like a mirror showing us the world upside down, shimmering slightly with the ripples. It's a common everyday phenomenon, something you barely notice, until it shows you something that shouldn't be there. It started subtly, so subtly that I questioned my own eyes. I was walking home one evening after a sudden rain shower. The sidewalk was slick, and in a small puddle I saw my reflection. Just a quick glance down, but for a second, the sky reflected in the puddle seemed too dark, too stormy, compared to the clear sky above me. And my reflection's face seemed blank, devoid of expression, utterly still, while my real face was probably scowling at the wet pavement. I blinked, and the reflection shimmered with a tiny ripple, returning to normal, just my slightly annoyed face looking back under a clear sky. I dismissed it as glare. The distortion of the water surface, tiredness. Puddles are imperfect mirrors, but the anomaly returned. The next time, I was washing my hands in the sink. I glanced up at the mirror above the sink. Normal reflection of myself. The bathroom behind me. Then I looked down at my reflection in the still water pooling in the sink basin. The background in the water reflection was different. Darker, the tile on the wall behind me in the water looked cracked and stained, unlike the clean tiles in the actual bathroom. And in the reflection, I saw a flicker of movement in the bathroom doorway, a shadow that wasn't there in reality. I splashed the water instinctively. The reflection broke apart, then reformed, showing the normal, clean bathroom. This wasn't just a puddle anomaly. It was tied to reflections in water, any still water. Over the next few weeks, I saw it repeatedly. In a full bathtub, my reflection's eyes seemed too wide, too dark, and the reflection of the bathroom behind me looked warped, the corners stretching into impossible shapes. In a glass of water on my nightstand, my reflection would sometimes appear slightly delayed, or its expression would shift into something I hadn't intended. A flicker of fear, or worse, a cold, alien stillness. The more I saw it, the more a knot of dread tightened in my stomach. This wasn't random. It felt like I was getting glimpses into another reality, or that the water wasn't just showing me my world, but another one overlaid, hidden just beneath the surface tension. I started actively seeking out still water, despite the fear, a desperate need to understand, to see more, to confirm what I was witnessing. I'd fill a bowl with water and just stare into it, forcing myself to look at the reflection. The anomalies would appear more readily now. My reflection would sometimes be subtly distorted, features elongated or blurred. The background would shift, showing rooms I didn't recognize, dark and empty, or sometimes filled with an oppressive shadow. Attempting to document it was futile. I tried taking photos of the water surface, hoping to capture the impossible reflection. The photos showed only the surface of the water, maybe a distorted reflection of the ceiling or light fixture, but never the strange backgrounds or the altered features I was seeing with my own eyes. It was as if the anomaly existed only for my perception, or only in that specific interaction between my eyes and the reflected image. The psychological toll was immense. My fear of water, or rather reflective water, became crippling. Puddles on the street filled me with dread. Washing dishes became an ordeal. Taking a bath felt terrifying, surrounded by a surface that could show me horrors. I started using opaque cups exclusively, terrified of catching sight of a wrong reflection in my drink. The fear of seeing myself in water became tangled with a fear of my own reflection, my own image. If my reflection could show something wrong, something terrible, was it still truly me? Was something else looking out through my reflection in that other space? The reflections grew bolder, more disturbing. The backgrounds weren't just empty dark rooms anymore. They sometimes showed brief, horrifying scenes. A flash of a figure moving quickly in the background of a reflection in a kitchen sink. A glimpse of impossible colors or textures in the water reflection of a park fountain. The sense that whatever was being reflected wasn't just a static image but a window into something active and potentially dangerous. The climax came late one evening. I was utterly exhausted, emotionally drained by the constant fear and the struggle to distinguish reality from the horrors I was seeing in water. I decided, despite my crippling fear, to try taking a bath, hoping the mundane routine might ground me. I filled the tub, the sound of the running water usually soothing, now filling me with anxiety. I turned off the tap. The water surface stilled. I looked down at my reflection in the still bathwater. It was terrifyingly clear. The bathroom behind me in the reflection wasn't just distorted. It was transformed into the decaying, shadowy house from my nightmares. The one I had just dreamed of again the previous night. The walls were peeling, the air thick with dust, and standing directly behind my reflection, closer than anything I had seen before, was a figure. It was tall, gaunt, cloaked in shadow, its features indistinct, but I knew it was the figure from my dreams. The one that haunted the reflection in my living room window. It was there, in the reflection in my bathwater, standing behind my reflection, and then my reflection in the water smiled. It wasn't my smile, it was wide, unnatural, chillingly slow, revealing too many teeth. Its eyes, reflecting mine, were dark voids, and as it smiled, its reflection raised a hand, skeletal and elongated, and slowly, impossibly, reached out from the water reflection towards me. Terror, pure and absolute, overwhelmed me. The water in the tub suddenly felt unnaturally cold, biting at my skin, and I felt a phantom pull on my arm, as if the reflection's hand was reaching out of the water itself. I heard sounds emanating from the water, low and gurgling, like whispers trying to surface, accompanied by that chilling, impossible laugh that seemed to bubble up from the depths of the tub. Screaming, I scrambled out of the tub, splashing water everywhere, desperate to get away from the surface, from the reflection, from the terrifying hand reaching out. I fumbled with the drain plug, tearing it out, watching the water swirl and drain away, the horrifying reflection fragmenting and vanishing with it. I stood there, naked, trembling, gasping for air, surrounded by the echoes of the sounds I had heard, and the chilling image of my reflection's monstrous smile. The water was gone, but the fear remained, a cold, hard knot in my stomach. Since that night, I avoid still water at all costs. I shower, I drink from opaque containers. I look away from puddles and fountains. The world is full of reflective water surfaces, and each one feels like a potential window to that terrifying other side. I don't know what is in that other space, or why its reflection appears in water, or why it seems aware of me, targeting me through my own image. But I know that my reflection in water is no longer just me. It's a distorted image, a potential gateway, a terrifying reminder that the boundary between realities can be thin. And sometimes, if you look into the water, something looks back, and it might try to reach out. And I live with the constant terrifying fear that one day, no matter how fast I drain the water, something might make it through. We live surrounded by static, by noise, visual and auditory. The random pixels on a detuned television screen, the hiss between radio stations, the complex grain of wood, the intricate patterns in textured walls, the seemingly chaotic arrangements of leaves on a pavement. Our brains are wired to find patterns in this noise, to make sense of the chaos, sometimes seeing faces in clouds or shapes in shadows. It's called pareidolia, a psychological phenomenon, harmless, until the patterns you see aren't random, until they seem deliberate, until they start watching back. It began innocuously enough. I still had an old CRT television in my bedroom, rarely used. One night, I turned it on but couldn't find anything interesting to watch. The screen was filled with that classic, dancing black and white static, a snowstorm of random pixels. I was staring at it blankly, my mind drifting, when for a split second, I thought I saw a face in the static. Not a clear face, just a fleeting arrangement of light and dark pixels that suggested eyes, a nose, a mouth. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, the static returning to its usual chaos. Pareidolia, I muttered to myself, seeing things. I turned the TV off and didn't think much more of it. A few days later, I was sanding down an old wooden chair, preparing to repaint it. I was looking closely at the wood grain, following the natural lines and swirls, and there, for a moment, the pattern of the grain seemed to arrange itself into a symbol. It looked vaguely familiar, like something from an ancient alphabet or a strange diagram, sharp angles and looping curves. Again, it was fleeting, the pattern resolving back into normal wood grain when I focused directly on it. But the image stuck with me. It wasn't a natural flow of the grain. It felt constructed. These isolated incidents, easily dismissed, began to accumulate. I'd be listening to the static between stations on my old radio, and within the hiss, I'd hear something, a low rhythmic pulse, or a sound that felt like a distorted whisper, just below the threshold of audibility. Looking at a textured wall, or the pattern on my carpet, I'd see fleeting shapes or symbols that seemed to arrange themselves from the random visual noise. The terrifying shift occurred when these patterns began to repeat across different sources. The strange symbol I saw in the wood grain, I started seeing hints of it in the TV static. The pulse I heard in the radio static seemed to echo the rhythm of a pattern I saw in the stucco ceiling. They felt connected, these random sources of noise and texture, somehow displaying aspects of the same underlying, disturbing imagery and sound. I started actively seeking out noise, a morbid fascination overriding my initial unease. I'd deliberately tune the radio to static, stare at the TV snow, examine textures around my apartment. The patterns were there, they were elusive, always clearest in my peripheral vision, fading when I focused directly, but they were there, disturbing faces, some human-like but wrong, with empty eyes or twisted smiles, symbols that felt ancient and menacing, sometimes brief fleeting arrangements of pixels that looked like letters, forming fragments of words that made no sense, or hinted at unsettling concepts. The feeling of being watched intensified. It felt like these patterns weren't just appearing, they were being shown to me. The random noise of the world felt like a screen, and something was projecting onto it, using the inherent chaos to display its message. Paranoia began to consume me. Who was doing this? What did they want? Was this a test? A form of communication from an unknown entity? Was it everywhere? In all noise, and I was just starting to perceive it. I tried to document the patterns. I'd take photos of textured walls, video of TV static. But when I reviewed the photos or videos, they looked normal. Just texture, just static. The patterns I saw with my own eyes didn't seem to be captured by the camera. This inability to prove what I was seeing fueled the terrifying possibility that it was all in my head, that I was hallucinating, losing my grip on reality. But the patterns felt too consistent, too complex, too synchronized across different sources to be mere delusion. The psychological toll was immense. Sleep was difficult, my mind racing, filled with the disturbing images and symbols I had seen. I started avoiding loud static on the radio or TV. I became uneasy looking at textured surfaces, afraid of what patterns might emerge. The world, with its inherent visual and auditory noise, felt less safe, less random. It felt like it contained a hidden layer, a terrifying language spoken just beneath the surface. The fear built steadily, culminating one night during a severe thunderstorm. The power flickered erratically. My old CRT TV, which I hadn't unplugged despite my fear, suddenly flared to life with a burst of static, filling the room with its loud hiss and dancing pixels. At the same time, the radio on my bedside table, also not unplugged, crackled to life with loud static between stations. The storm outside seemed to amplify the signal, filling my small apartment with a cacophony of white noise. And in the midst of this overwhelming surge of random noise, the patterns converged. On the TV screen, the static wasn't random anymore. It resolved terrifyingly into a clear, high-contrast image. It was a face, not human, twisted, skeletal, with empty, dark eye sockets, its mouth a wide, silent scream. It filled the entire screen, looking directly at me from the static. From the radio speakers, the static transformed into sound. Not just his, but a horrifying blend of noises, scraping, clicking, and weaving through it all, a chorus of what sounded like pained whispers and low guttural growls emanating from the little machine on my nightstand. At the same time, the texture on the wall beside the TV seemed to deepen, the patterns within it shifting and rearranging themselves. I watched horrified as they formed a distinct readable shape, a symbol, one of the menacing ones I had seen before, glowing faintly with an inner dark light. And then, slowly, other shapes formed around it, pixelated, crude, arranging themselves into words. The words formed were simple, stark, and terrifyingly direct. "We see you. Join us." The face on the TV, the sounds from the radio, the symbol and words on the wall, all happening simultaneously, converging upon me. It was an overwhelming sensory assault of horror. It felt like the very fabric of reality was being used as a canvas, and something from beyond was screaming messages at me. Through the world's inherent noise, I felt a searing headache, a wave of nausea, and a terrifying sense of being utterly exposed, seen and targeted. Pure, animalistic terror seized me. This wasn't hallucination. This was real. Whatever was communicating through the static, the wood grain, the noise, was here, now revealing itself in full force. With a strangled cry, I lunged forward, smashing the TV screen, with a lamp, sending glass and static flying. I ripped the radio from its plug, throwing it across the room where it hit the wall with a crash, and fell silent. I backed away from the wall with the words, pressing myself into the opposite corner, covering my ears, squeezing my eyes shut, trying desperately to block out the horrifying sensory input. The storm continued to rage outside, but the terror inside my apartment began to recede as the sources of the patterns were eliminated. The silence that returned was ragged, broken only by my own trembling breaths, and the pounding of my heart. That night broke something within me. The sources of the patterns were gone, destroyed, but the images and sounds are burned into my mind. The face on the TV, the whispers from the radio, the words on the wall, they are permanent residents in my memory. I now live in a world without static. No cable TV, no radio. I avoid textured walls, patterned carpets. I get jumpy around ambient noise, terrified it might resolve into something horrifying. I constantly scan surfaces, scanning the visual noise of the world, half expecting to see a pattern emerge, a disturbing symbol, a watching face. The experience showed me that the world isn't just solid objects and clear sounds. There's a layer of chaos, of noise, that can be exploited, that can be used as a channel, and something is using it. Something that sees through the static, talks through the hiss, and waits in the patterns. And I live with the chilling knowledge that even though I destroyed the messengers, the sender might still be out there, waiting for the right moment, or the right kind of noise, to try and reach me again. And I'm forever left wondering what "we see you. Join us" truly meant. Houses have spaces we don't often think about, areas designed for practical purposes, storage, or simply structural necessity, but which we rarely inhabit. The attic is one such place. In my house, it's accessed by a pull-down ladder in the upstairs hallway ceiling. It's an unfinished space, full of blown-in insulation, exposed joists, cobwebs, and the forgotten remnants of previous owners, old suitcases, dusty boxes, rolls of faded carpet. It's hot in the summer, cold in the winter, and generally a place I avoided unless absolutely necessary, which made the sounds all the more terrifying. It started as most of these things do, subtly, faint sounds from above, in the attic space, scrambling light thumping, like something moving around up there. My first thought, my immediate rationalization, was animals, squirrels, maybe, or raccoons. It's an old house, and critters find ways in. Annoying, but normal. I called an exterminator. He poked around outside, checked the roofline, but found no obvious entry points for anything larger than mice. He set some traps for smaller rodents in the attic access point, and told me to call him if the problem persisted. The sounds did persist, but they changed. The light scurrying was replaced by heavier thuds, deliberate sounding movements. The occasional bump became solid thumps, like something heavy being set down, or falling over. I started hearing a distinct scraping sound, long and slow, as if something vast and rough was being dragged across the wooden joists directly above my bedroom ceiling. These weren't squirrel sounds. They were too heavy, too slow, too purposeful. The sounds seemed to concentrate above certain rooms, my bedroom, the living room directly below it on the first floor. I'd lie in bed at night, listening to the heavy thuds and scrapes directly above me, my heart pounding. The ceiling, a thin layer of drywall and plaster, felt like the only thing separating me from whatever was making those sounds. My initial assumption shifted from animals to something larger. Maybe a raccoon family had found a way in, despite the exterminator missing the entry point. But the sounds still felt wrong for a raccoon. There was a ponderousness to them, a weight that felt heavier than any animal I could think of that would inhabit an attic, and the scraping sound was particularly disturbing. Long, continuous strokes that suggested something vast was being moved, or that something was attempting to alter the space up there. I decided I had to see what was up there. One evening, while the sounds were active above the living room, I went to the hallway, took a deep breath, and pulled down the attic ladder. The sound stopped instantly. Complete silence from above. I stood at the base of the ladder, listening. Nothing. Just the quiet hum of the house. I slowly pushed the ladder back up. A few minutes later, once I was back in the living room, the heavy thuds resumed above me. It knew. Whatever it was, it knew I was checking. This apparent awareness was terrifying. It meant it wasn't just an animal making noise. It was something that understood intrusion, that could halt its activity. The moment I tried to access its space, the sounds felt like a challenge, a deliberate assertion of presence, stopping only when I approached its domain. Driven by a desperate need to identify it, I tried different methods. I got a motion-activated camera, planning to set it up near the attic hatch. But the thought of opening that hatch and sticking my hand up there to position the camera filled me with pure dread. I couldn't bring myself to do it. I tried using a sensitive microphone pressed against the ceiling, but the sounds were too muffled, too distorted to identify. Just heavy impacts and grating noises. I started researching the house's history, looking for any reports of strange occurrences, any stories about previous owners. I found nothing remarkable, just a chain of normal residents, normal sales, no mention of bizarre noises, no reports of anything unusual happening in the attic. It was a dead end, leaving me alone with the impossible sounds above. The psychological toll was immense. My house, my sanctuary, felt compromised. I was sharing it with something I couldn't see, couldn't identify, couldn't trap, and couldn't ignore. Lying in bed, listening to the sounds directly above me, was an exercise in pure terror. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind, was filtered through the lens of fearing what was above. I became paranoid, feeling like it was listening to me below, learning my patterns, waiting for the right moment. The heavy thuds and scraping became more focused, more persistent, seemingly centered above my bedroom and a section of the living room ceiling. It felt like it was concentrating its activity, maybe clearing a space, or, worse. The sounds culminated one night, in a terrifying direct assault. I was in my bedroom, reading, when the sounds from the attic intensified dramatically. It wasn't just thuds anymore, it was heavy, rapid pounding, directly above my head. Like something huge and angry was hitting the ceiling with immense force, over and over. Boom, boom, boom. The plaster ceiling above me seemed to flex, to groan under the impact. Dust sifted down from the seams. The light fixture rattled violently. Accompanying the pounding was that awful, grating, scraping sound, faster now, more frantic, like something being dragged violently across the joists. The air in the room grew suddenly, intensely cold, radiating downwards from the ceiling, carrying a disturbing, unfamiliar smell. Something animalistic but wrong, metallic and sour. The combination of the violent sounds, the physical stress on the ceiling, the falling dust, the cold, and the smell was overwhelming. It felt undeniable. Whatever was up there, it wasn't just moving around anymore. It was trying to get down. It was actively attempting to break through the ceiling into my bedroom. Pure, animalistic terror propelled me out of bed. I scrambled away from the center of the room, staring up at the ceiling where the plaster looked like it might give way any second. The pounding was relentless, shaking the room, accompanied by the frantic scraping and that horrifying smell. I could hear the wood of the joists groaning, protesting against the impossible weight and impact. I didn't grab anything. I didn't stop to think. My only instinct was to escape. I ran out of the bedroom, down the hallway, and scrambled down the stairs to the first floor, my heart hammering against my ribs, gasping for air. I could still hear the frantic pounding from the attic, though muffled by the floor between us, seeming to follow my movement, now directly above the living room. I ran out of the house, into the cold night air, standing on my front lawn, trembling, staring up at the silent, dark house. The sounds from the attic had stopped the moment I exited the house. Complete silence. As if whatever was up there knew I was gone, or had ceased its attempt to break through. I didn't go back inside that night. I drove to a motel, leaving my house to the unseen thing in the attic. I still live in the house. I eventually went back, but I avoid the upstairs entirely now. I sleep downstairs in the living room, directly beneath the area where the pounding was strongest. It's a perverse form of exposure therapy, perhaps, forcing myself to be near the threat, but the bedroom upstairs remains empty, silent, off limits. The sounds from the attic are less frequent now, less violent. Occasionally, I still hear a heavy thud, a faint scrape, a creak of joists under weight. They still stop, if I even approach the stairs to go up, or if I stand directly under the attic hatch. It's still there, still aware. I don't know what it is. Was it an animal twisted by something unnatural? An entity trapped in the space between the roof and the ceiling? Whatever it is, it showed me that the structure of my home isn't just walls and a roof. It's a cage, or maybe a battleground, and something is living in the forgotten space above. A constant, chilling presence that proved it could, and perhaps still can, try to break through into my world. And I live with the terrifying knowledge that it's always up there, waiting, in the darkness and the dust, just on the other side of the ceiling. And sometimes late at night, I listen, and I wonder if the pounding will ever start again. I love taking photos. My phone is filled with them, snapshots of everyday life, pictures of friends, scenery from walks, candid moments I want to remember. It's a way of documenting my life, capturing fragments of time to look back on. It's a personal modern diary, visual and easily accessible. I never thought it could become a record of something else, entirely. Something terrifying and impossible. It started with a photo I took on a sunny afternoon in the park. Just a casual shot of the trees and a few people walking in the distance. Later, scrolling through my camera roll, I paused on that one. In the far background, amidst the foliage, I noticed something odd, a dark patch that looked like a person standing perfectly still. I zoomed in. It was a person, or at least, a figure in human shape. It was blurry, partially obscured by branches, standing unnaturally still, facing my direction. I figured it was just someone in the park, maybe waiting for someone, and the distance and the trees made them look odd. A random stranger caught in the background. I didn't think much more of it. Then, a week later, I took a photo at an outdoor cafe with friends. A group shot, everyone smiling. Later, reviewing the photo, my eyes were drawn to the background again. Near the edge of the frame, behind my friends, near a wall, was a figure. It was partially hidden by a plant, but its outline was clear. Again, standing perfectly still, facing the camera. It had the same general build and height as the figure in the park photo. This time, a prickle of unease. Two unrelated locations, two instances of a motionless figure in the background. Coincidence, I told myself. Maybe they were just taking a break, on their phone or something, but the sightings continued. In photos from completely different days, different parts of the city, even indoors. A photo I took at a quiet museum, a blurry figure standing static in a distant doorway. A shot of a street scene, a dark shape frozen in place on the opposite sidewalk. A photo taken at a small private gathering at a friend's apartment. In the background, in a dimly lit corner of the room, A figure stood unnaturally still, looking directly at the camera. This was impossible. It wasn't a random stranger. It was the same figure, inserting itself into my photos. The figure was always the same, tall, slender, its face indistinct, often obscured by shadow or distance, but its posture was consistently unnatural, utterly motionless, often facing directly towards the camera. It was always in the background, but gradually it started appearing less obscured, closer to the middle ground, its presence more prominent. The horrifying realization dawned on me. This figure wasn't there when I took the photos. I clearly remembered taking the photo in the museum. That doorway was empty. The apartment gathering was small. I knew everyone there. That corner was clear. This figure was being added to my photos after I took them. Or perhaps it was always there, but only visible through the lens of my camera, captured as a static entity in a frozen moment. I started comparing the photos more closely, checking timestamps, locations, zooming in as much as possible. The figure's appearance was consistent in its inconsistency, always static, always facing me, but its placement defied logic and physical possibility. It was a silent, impossible invader of my personal history, inserting itself into my documented reality. I tried showing the photos to others. "Do you see anything weird in this picture?" I'd ask, casually. Some people didn't notice anything unusual, their eyes glazing over the background clutter. Others would see the figure, but dismiss it as a random person. Yeah, just some guy standing there. Why? They didn't see the unsettling stillness, the impossible location, the recurring presence. They saw what their brains told them was normal. This failure to get confirmation amplified my fear, making me question if I was somehow the only one perceiving this intrusion, or if the figure was only visible to me. I became obsessed with the figure, with its appearances. My camera roll became a source of dread. Every new photo I took was a potential new sighting. The act of taking a picture, once a simple way to capture a memory, became terrifying. Was I inviting it in? Was I documenting my own haunting? I tried to delete the photos containing the figure. On my phone, the delete function seemed to work, the photo vanishing from my album. But hours later, or the next day, the photo would be back. Sometimes a corrupted file would appear that couldn't be opened or deleted, but its file name suggested it was the photo I had tried to get rid of. It felt like the figure, or whatever was behind it, didn't want its presence erased from my documented life. The psychological toll was immense. I felt constantly watched, not just in real life, but in my own recorded history. The figure felt like a stalker that existed outside of normal space and time, using my camera as a tool to assert its presence in my life. I became paranoid about cameras, about having my picture taken by others, terrified that the figure would appear in their photos too, a horrifying confirmation of its reality. The figure's appearances in my photos became bolder. It was no longer just in the deep background. It would appear closer to the subjects, sometimes standing just a few feet away from friends or family members, utterly still and unnoticed by them. The horror of seeing it near people I cared about, knowing they were oblivious to its impossible presence, was excruciating. Its face remained indistinct, a blur or a shadow, but its form felt increasingly menacing, its stillness radiating a cold, unnatural energy. The climax came with a series of photos I took at home, just simple shots of my apartment interior. I wasn't even trying to capture anything special, just testing the light. I reviewed them immediately. The first photo was normal. The second, near the corner of the living room, partially obscured by a chair. The figure stood, static, facing the camera. In the third photo, taken seconds later from a different angle, the figure was in the same corner, but subtly different, its head tilted slightly. And in the fourth photo, taken from a different part of the room, the figure was much closer, standing in the middle ground, terrifyingly clear. It was still static, frozen in that unnatural posture, but its form was sharper now. I zoomed in, trembling. Its face was still indistinct, a dark void, but its eyes, I could make out the suggestion of eyes, dark points in the featureless face that seemed to burn with a cold, static intensity. And its posture was wrong. One shoulder seemed lower than the other, its head tilted at an impossible angle. It wasn't human. As I stared at the photo on my screen, the figure's static eyes seemed to bore into mine from the digital space. The image file itself seemed to vibrate subtly, and my phone felt cold in my hand. It felt like the figure's presence, captured and magnified, was reaching out from the photo, directly targeting me. Driven by pure terror, I went through my phone's entire photo library, every photo, every video I had ever taken. I scrolled through them frantically, and the figure was there, in dozens, maybe hundreds, of photos I had never noticed before. Hidden in the backgrounds of cherished memories, a silent, static observer inserted into the record of my life. A vast, horrifying collection of evidence that I was being watched, documented, haunted by something that existed outside the flow of time and space. Using my camera as its tool, I didn't know what else to do. With trembling hands, I initiated a factory reset on my phone, erasing everything. Photos, videos, apps, data, a desperate final act of trying to rid myself of the figure and its chilling record. The phone is clean now, empty of history. But the images are not gone from my mind. The static figure, in its various impossible appearances, is burned into my memory. I no longer take photos. The sight of a camera lens fills me with dread. I avoid looking at photos others take too closely, terrified of seeing that familiar static shape lurking in the background. I don't know what the static figure is, or why it chose to appear in my photos, to insert itself into my life's visual history. Was it a glitch in reality? An entity that exists in moments, rather than continuity? Whatever it is, it showed me that even our most personal records are not safe. That the line between capturing reality and capturing something else entirely can be terrifyingly blurred, and I live with the constant chilling fear that the static figure is still out there, just beyond the frame of reality, waiting for the next camera to capture it, or perhaps waiting for a way to step out of the background and become more than just a static image in the record of my life. And the most terrifying thought is that maybe, just maybe, it's always behind me, just out of sight, waiting for me to turn around, waiting to be seen not just in a photo, but in real life. It was just a stone. Unremarkable, really. I found it on a walk near an old disused section of railway line, where the tracks had been removed and weeds were growing through the gravel. It was a smooth, dark gray stone, larger than a pebble but smaller than my fist, maybe the size of a golf ball, heavy for its size, worn smooth by time and weather. It caught my eye because of its uniform color and satisfying weight. I picked it up, turned it over in my hand, and put it in my pocket, thinking it might make a decent paperweight, or just a tactile little object to fiddle with. It sat on my desk for a couple of days. I picked it up occasionally, liking its weight and smooth feel. It was on the third day that I first noticed it. I picked the stone up, held it in my palm, and felt a subtle vibration. It wasn't strong, nothing like a phone vibrating against your skin. It was softer, a low internal shudder that seemed to come from within the stone itself, humming against my palm. I paused, confused. Was it my hand? Was I trembling without realizing it? I put the stone down on the desk and held my hand flat, perfectly steady. I picked the stone up again. The vibration was still there, a low, pulsing tremor. I placed the stone on the desk surface. It sat there still and silent. I picked it up, vibration. Okay, that was weird. Maybe it was some residual energy, static electricity, a strange property of the stone itself. I tried to replicate it, rubbing the stone, tapping it. Nothing triggered the vibration. It only seemed to happen when I held it, specifically when I held it loosely in my open palm, or lightly in my fingers. Over the next few days, the vibration became a consistent reality whenever I picked up the stone. It was always the same, a low internal shudder or hum. It felt organic, not mechanical. It didn't stop, didn't change rhythm. It just vibrated. All the time I held it, I started noticing that the intensity of the vibration seemed to vary. It felt stronger in certain places in my apartment, particularly in my bedroom at night, and it felt stronger when I was feeling anxious or stressed. This correlation with my emotional state or specific locations was deeply unsettling. Was the stone reacting to me, to the environment? I asked friends to hold it. Feel anything? I'd ask, trying to keep my voice neutral. They'd turn it over in their hands. Smooth stone, they'd say. Feels heavy. None of them felt the vibration. Not one. This isolated the experience, confirming that it was either something only I could perceive, or that the stone's vibration was somehow triggered by my touch, my presence. The latter possibility was terrifying. What kind of object vibrates only for one person? What was it reacting to? Was it sensing something around me? Was it sensing something in me? When I held the stone for longer periods, I started experiencing accompanying sensations. A subtle coldness would emanate from it, colder than a stone should be at room temperature. Biting at my fingers, I'd hear a faint, high-pitched whine, almost inaudible, that seemed to resonate from the stone, or perhaps was happening inside my head when I held it. And the low hum of the vibration itself sometimes seemed to carry a subtle, unsettling undertone, like a distant, pained sigh. I became obsessed with the stone. I researched its possible geological origins, based on where I found it. Mostly sedimentary rock, nothing known for strange properties. I researched legends about vibrating stones, cursed objects, anything that might offer an explanation. Nothing fit. I tried leaving the stone in different places in the apartment. Watching it, it just sat there inert, silent. But the moment I picked it up, the vibration would start. The psychological toll was immense. The stone felt like a live wire, a conduit to something I didn't understand. It felt like it was constantly sensing something, and the vibration was its reaction. What was it sensing? Was it something bad? Was the vibration a warning? Or was the vibration itself doing something to me, inducing these sensations and feelings of unease? The fear of holding it was immense, but the pull to understand was stronger, pushing me to pick it up again and again, to feel the vibration, to experience the accompanying cold and sound, hoping for a clue. The fear of it grew, especially when the vibration felt stronger. In my bedroom at night, the hum was deeper, the pulsing more distinct. The cold it radiated was more intense. It felt like the stone was reacting to the darkness, to the silence, to my vulnerability. The climax came late one night. I was in my bedroom, alone, the house silent. I felt an intense wave of anxiety wash over me, the kind that settles deep in your gut. Involuntarily, my hand reached for the stone on my nightstand. I picked it up. The vibration began immediately, but this time it wasn't just a hum or a pulse. It was violent. The stone buzzed and shook in my hand with incredible force, a jarring, painful vibration that felt like it was trying to tear itself apart or shake my bones loose. It vibrated so hard it was difficult to hold on to. The accompanying sensations were overwhelming. A searing, agonizing cold shot up my arm from the stone, freezing my blood. The faint whine became a piercing, high-pitched shriek that seemed to bore into my skull, deafening me to everything else. And within the overwhelming vibration and sound, I felt a horrifying surge of pure, unadulterated terror flooding my mind. Images flashed before my eyes, disjointed and terrifying. Darkness, crushing pressure, the sound of screaming, a feeling of being trapped and in agony. It felt like the stone was transmitting a moment of profound horror directly into my consciousness, amplified by the violent vibration. The stone itself felt wrong. It felt impossibly heavy, impossible light, impossibly hot, impossibly cold, all at once. It felt like a knot of pure, screaming energy in my palm. The vibration was agony, physical and mental. It felt like it was pulling something towards me, or trying to escape from my hand, or trying to force something into me through the contact. Driven by a desperate need to break the connection, to stop the terrifying transmission, I screamed and threw the stone with all my might across the room. It hit the far wall with a loud thud and fell to the floor. The instant it left my hand, the vibration stopped, the piercing sound vanished. The intense cold receded, leaving my hand burning and numb. The horrifying images and feelings receded from my mind, leaving me gasping for air, shaking uncontrollably, my body slick with cold sweat. I lay in bed the rest of the night, trembling, staring at the dark corner where the stone had landed. I didn't dare go get it. The next morning, in the light of day, I retrieved the stone. It was just a stone, lying on the floor. I picked it up. It was cool, smooth, and utterly still. No vibration. Since that night, the stone has remained inert. I keep it in a box, in a drawer, out of sight. But the experience left a permanent mark. My hands sometimes tremble for no reason, and I feel phantom vibrations in my palms, especially when I'm scared or stressed. I avoid touching strange objects, particularly stones. I don't know what that stone was, or why it vibrated, or what those horrifying sensations it transmitted meant. Was it a witness to something terrible? A vessel for a trapped energy? A key to another dimension? I have no answers. But the experience showed me that even the most mundane objects can hide impossible properties, and that sometimes, touching something in the world means touching something that isn't entirely of this world, something that can leave you permanently marked by the terror it holds within its silent, vibrating form. And I live with the chilling knowledge that I touched that stone. I felt its power and a piece of that terrifying vibration, that connection to the unknown, might still be rattling around inside me. I've always had a fairly sensitive nose. Not overly so, but I notice smells, the metallic tang before rain, the specific scent of old paper in a library, the subtle difference in the air before snow. My apartment is clean, well maintained, and usually smells pleasantly neutral, maybe a faint hint of laundry detergent or coffee, which is why the arrival of the smell was so profoundly unsettling. It started one evening, unexpectedly. I was just relaxing in my living room, when I caught a whiff of something deeply unpleasant. It was hard to place at first, a bit like damp soil, mixed with something else. Metallic, and faintly sweet, but not a good kind of sweet. Like decay. It was subtle but definitely there, hanging in the air. My immediate reaction was practical. Had something spoiled in the kitchen? Did a drain need cleaning? I got up and did a quick check. I sniffed around the kitchen sink. Nothing. Checked the garbage can, empty, clean liner, opened the fridge. Everything seemed fine. I walked around the apartment, trying to follow the scent, to pinpoint its source. It seemed strongest in the living room, near the window, but also faintly present in the hallway. I opened the window, thinking maybe it was coming from outside, perhaps something unpleasant in the alley, or construction work. The fresh air seemed to dissipate it, and after a few minutes, I couldn't smell it anymore. Okay, I thought, just a weird outside smell. But the next day, it returned, just as strong, just as disturbing, and this time the window was closed. I went through the same routine, checked the trash, the drains, looked under furniture, sniffed at the walls and floor. Nothing. It seemed to be just in the air. It hung there heavy and unpleasant, that mix of damp earth, metallic tang, and sickly decay. Over the next few days, the scent became a persistent, terrifying presence. It would appear without warning, sometimes in the living room, sometimes in the bedroom, sometimes the entire apartment would seem to be filled with it. It didn't seem tied to the weather, or the time of day, or whether I had been cooking or cleaning. It just was, hanging in the air, a constant reminder of something fundamentally wrong. The quality of the smell also seemed to shift subtly. Sometimes it leaned more towards the metallic, like old blood and rust. Other times it was overwhelmingly sweet and sickly, like rotting fruit mixed with something chemical. But always, there was that underlying sense of damp earth and decay. It was the smell of something that was breaking down, something that shouldn't be where it was. I became obsessive about finding the source. I pulled out appliances, checked behind walls carefully, sniffing at outlets and vents, inspected every inch of my floorboards for signs of moisture or decay. I researched potential household smells, hidden mold, pest infestations, gas leaks. I had the gas company come check. Everything was fine, but every avenue led to a dead end. My apartment was clean, dry, structurally sound. There was no physical source for the smell. The most terrifying realization came when friends visited. The smell was potent to me. filling the air around the sofa in the living room. I braced myself, feeling a wave of nausea from the intense odor. Do you smell that? I asked hesitantly, gesturing vaguely. They paused, sniffing the air. Smell what? One asked. I don't smell anything, said the other. Just smells like a regular apartment. My heart sank. I tried again, describing the smell, the damp earth, the metallic note, the sweetness of decay. They looked at me with concern, exchanging uneasy glances. I'm sorry, my friend, said gently. I really don't smell anything like that. Maybe you're just... He trailed off, not wanting to say, imagining things. Their inability to smell it was horrifyingly isolating. It meant the smell wasn't a physical phenomenon in the air that everyone could perceive. It was tied to me, or to the apartment in a way only I could sense. Was it in my head? A symptom of some unknown illness? Or was it a phantom? A manifestation of something unseen that chose to reveal itself through my sense of smell? The self-doubt was agonizing, a constant battle against the undeniable reality of the odor filling my senses. The smell became more than just an unpleasant odor. It felt like a presence, a silent intruder making itself known through my nose. It seemed strongest in certain areas, that living room corner, near the hallway closet, sometimes near my bed, and its appearance sometimes seemed to coincide with other subtle anomalies I had previously dismissed. A sudden localized cold spot in the air, a feeling of being watched, a faint, almost inaudible sound that stopped when I tried to listen. The smell felt like a key, unlocking other unsettling sensations. The psychological toll was immense. I was consumed by the smell, by its mystery, by the fear of its appearance. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, jolted awake not by sound, but by the sudden, intense onset of that sickening smell filling my bedroom. Sleep deprivation, paranoia, the constant questioning of my sanity, the isolation of being the only one to experience this. It all combined to create a suffocating sense of dread. The apartment no longer felt like a safe, neutral space. It felt haunted, tainted by an invisible foul presence. The smell continued to escalate, becoming more potent, more aggressive. It wasn't just present anymore. It felt invasive, overwhelming. Sometimes it would appear with such intensity that it made me physically recoil, doubling over with nausea. Its quality would also sometimes morph, becoming explicitly horrifying, no longer just like decay, but like something freshly, violently wrong. The climax came one afternoon, while I was in the living room. The smell appeared suddenly, overwhelmingly strong. It was that sickeningly sweet, metallic decay, but amplified 1,000 times. It filled my nostrils, my mouth, my lungs, making me gag. It felt like I was breathing in pure rot and rust. But the smell wasn't just overwhelming. It was accompanied by other phenomena, stark and undeniable, tied directly to the intense odor. The air in the corner where the smell was strongest grew intensely cold, a biting chill that raised goosebumps on my skin. Despite the room's warmth, I heard faint, distinct sounds accompanying the smell, a low, wet slurping sound, and a soft, rhythmic thump that seemed to come from within the walls, vibrating in time with the pounding of my own heart. And as the smell reached its peak, thick and suffocating, I caught a fleeting visual distortion in the air of that corner, a shimmer, a wavering that suggested something was there, just out of sight, something immense and foul radiating that horrifying odor. The combination of the overpowering smell and the accompanying sensations shattered my ability to cope. It wasn't just a smell, it was a manifestation, a horrifying sensory intrusion from something unseen. Gasping for air, gagging on the smell, I scrambled away from the corner, stumbling back, desperate to escape the suffocating cloud of decay and metal. I made it to the front door, fumbling with the locks, my body shaking violently, feeling physically ill from the intensity of the smell and the terror. I burst out of my apartment and onto the hallway, into the relatively fresh air of the building corridor, collapsing against the wall, gasping, trembling. The moment I exited the apartment, the smell vanished. Completely, the air in the hallway was normal, but the memory of that overpowering odor, the cold, the sounds, the visual shimmer, it was seared into my senses. I haven't been back in my apartment since that day. I'm staying elsewhere, afraid to return. The thought of opening that door and being hit by that smell again, or worse,
Finding that the smell has intensified permanently is unbearable. The intense smell hasn't returned since I left the apartment, but I still experience phantom whiffs of it. Randomly, unexpectedly, I'll catch a faint, disturbing whiff of damp earth, metal or decay. No matter where I am, it triggers immediate panic, my heart hammering, my eyes darting around, searching for a source that isn't there. I don't know what the phantom scent is. Is it a ghost, a demon, some kind of interdimensional bleed, or is it some terrifying, unexplainable physical anomaly tied to that specific apartment? Or most terrifyingly, did that smell, that manifestation, somehow attach itself to me, marking me, so that I carry its terrifying presence with me, able to perceive it, even when I'm far away? The smell showed me that reality can be porous, and that some horrors don't announce themselves with sights or sounds, but through the invasion of a fundamental sense. And I live with the chilling knowledge that the world isn't always just what you see and hear. Sometimes what you smell can be a window into something horrifying, something that exists just beyond perception, making its presence known through an odor that defies explanation and haunts your very breath. And I'm forever trapped, waiting for the next time the phantom scent decides to return, a horrifying reminder that I am permanently marked by the smell of the unseen.